to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am thrilled to have Ed Miller on the show. He is the author of multiple poker books, and he is also the co-author of the sports betting books, The Logic of Sports Betting, and his most recent book, Interception. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. How's everything going?
It's good. It's beautiful. I live in Vegas, and this is my favorite time of year. So
yeah,
just weather-wise, it's gorgeous. Yeah,
late February.
Yep.
The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips in analytics. In addition, you'll get access to my March Madness cheat sheet that makes it drop dead easy to fill out your brackets. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. So Ed, you have most recently written the book Interception. You are the co-author with Matthew Davidow. What is the one point that you want readers of Interception to come away with?
Yeah, so I would say the main idea in Interception is that there's a big difference between kind of the old school style of sports betting, like the markets and, Vegas, all the cliches, right? Like Vegas and, but more what we talk about logic of sports betting with, okay, there's a pregame market and there's people on this side and the line moves and, et cetera, how all that works. And then how modern sports books work. And, we use the term modern sports book in the book. And, I do it kind of trying not to name names, but, the big companies that have moved in and are advertising on TV and all that stuff. And the way they have menus with thousands and thousands of options and all this stuff. And really the point of Interception is that is a completely different animal than the kind of old school style sports betting. And so that's the main point is this is different. And this is how the new modern sports books work. That's the kind of idea behind the book.
And everything that's in the book is based on your own experience. You and Matthew created Deck Prism, and maybe tell us a little bit about that and how that led to some of the content in the book.
Yeah, so we start when the Supreme Court thing came down. I had been working on in-play models, so that was my work. Before all this nonsense started, we were trying to basically make in-play lines for the major U.S. sports: NFL, college football, baseball, NBA, and college basketball were the ones we'd done. And just mostly for the betting, aimed at the betting side. And when the Supreme Court came down, we said, "Wow, well, we've got what we thought at the time were basically the best in-play models anyone seemed to have." You come to know who's out there and more who's not out there just by participating and seeing, who is betting. So it was pretty clear that we had kind of the most sophisticated stuff that anyone had at the time. And we said, well, maybe we can monetize what we have better by pointing it at the operator side. So that was the idea behind Deck Prism. We didn't realize how much additional software we would have to build to do that. You got to build, it's one thing to have tools and models that allow you to make a line at any given point in a game. And it's another thing to build software that allow you to have all the lines for all the games at all times up to the second and transmitted to customers. So kind of we had to build out all that stuff. So that was a big learning experience and honestly, kind of a lot of fun. And so that was what Deck Prism was, and that's my experience in the industry.
Yeah, Ed, so when you think back to when you started writing the code for the in-play modeling, do you wish you could go back and maybe just bet with that code instead of trying to get on the operator side?
Well, that was that was kind of the original thing we had going was, pointed at the betting side. And honestly, like, and this is part of what we talk about in Interception. You know, it's limited how much you can get down on this stuff. It's not, it's easy to say, oh, just go bet it. Well, it turns out that's a mouthful. Because and again, this is kind of one of the major themes of Interception. Nobody wants to lose money to you. Like when you're gambling, this is the sort of universal of gambling is someone has to be on the other side, and if you're winning, that means they're losing, and they have to be okay with that over a long period of time. And for the most part, people aren't okay with that. So obviously, there are various ways to kind of deal with that. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the quick answer for what's going on with in play. Is it's there's not an unlimited. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to bet NFL pregame. Well, you can get a lot down on an NFL pregame market. You know, even if you have a reputation for being good and winning, for various reasons, you're still able to bet on that, in fairly large volumes. Whereas, in play, it's just not the same, and so the upside is limited. The amount of growth you can achieve, it's limited, and so no, I guess the answer is no. I think we learned more and benefited more doing what we did with it than just continuing on our existing path.
For sure. When you wrote the logic of sports betting, I believe that's when you guys first started Deck Prism, and the book was a way to kind of market that you and Matthew existed and this company existed. What was the reason behind why you guys decided to write Interception and reveal all these this new modern sports book?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there's several reasons. There's always several reasons anybody ever does anything, right? But I mean, I would say the number one reason is just I had all this stuff banging around in my head for and accumulating over the years, and I mean, it wanted to come out. If I had to say it, I mean, I just had some stuff I wanted to say. Um, yeah, so that's reason one was just purely just to get ideas out of my head and onto paper. Um, I would say another reason is I would like to see the industry evolve and improve. And so this is sort of and I would like to see everyone get on the same page. Sometimes I see discussions about modern sports books, in my opinion, kind of devolve in an ignorant way on multiple sides. I would say sometimes bettors are like, oh, they cut everyone off. It sucks. It's not fair. They're, broke ass losers, whatever, right? That attitude. And then the industry side sees the complete opposite. They're like these people that complain about getting cut off, or there's like a tiny minority of them. They're just whiny, annoying people. Like, let's just ignore them, you know?
Yeah.
And, what we're doing is completely justified. And, this is the way we need to do business. And there's no other way to do it. And, and in my opinion, kind of everyone in that discussion tends to have blinders on and sees it only from their perspective and isn't really seeing the other perspective, isn't really trying to find a middle ground or something that's actually kind of an evolution forward where everyone kind of gets most of what they want. So yeah, that was kind of my other goal is I wanted to say, look, this is how it works. These are the challenges from the industry side that are real. These are the problems that players have that are also real. And let's try to do better. I mean, that's another reason I wrote the book. Yeah.
I appreciate those sentences in the book where you're like, look, sports books have to make money. That's why they limit you, and don't go completely crazy on them because there are ways to not get limited, right? Which you talk about as well.
Yeah, there's ways to knock it. And the other thing is like people on the betting side, like you have to understand, it's what I said before. Like, if you're winning at gambling, someone else is losing. And nobody wants to lose. And not only that, but like if you're beating them and then there's 1,000 of your closest friends are beating them the same way, and it's all exponential growth. You could start with, I mean, all this stuff is compounding. It's all day after day. There's these betting opportunities. And okay, if you win 1 or 2% of your bankroll every day, well, very soon, $100 turns into 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, and I mean, you're just taking these companies for literally their entire, you know, market cap. I mean, that's how the math works. So, I mean, there just has to be that just has to be a limit. It's something that's not mathematically impossible. What some of the players want is just not. It's just not a thing. So, yeah, and I wanted to try to explain that in the most rational way possible.
Yeah, no, you did a really good job with that.
Yeah.
Ed, in the book, you talk about some markets that are determined by price discovery. So this was the main idea one of the main ideas that you presented in the logic of sports betting, and we're talking about major markets like NFL sides. And then you compare that with other markets that are set by math models.
Yep.
Explain to us which one of these is easier to beat and why.
Right. So again, easier to beat is there is a multi-dimensional question,
Of
right?
course. Yeah,
So
sorry.
well, no, it's good. So in one hand, where is it easier to so first of all, let's just be clear about what we're talking about here. So a pregame NFL point spread, the way that gets made is basically let's just call it a week before the game. I mean, it actually happens even further in the past than that nowadays. But let's say a week before the game,
Right.
someone somewhere just throws up a line and starts taking bets. That's how it works. Someone has to be first, and they just say Bears -7, go, $500 limit, right? And
Right.
then people go, right, and they just start betting, and people have their model, they have their angles, they have whatever, and they just start betting, and the people that go first move the line based on the bets that come in. They have some knowledge of their customers, and they have some ability to interpret how much to value the information they get from each of the bets that come in, and they adjust their lines accordingly, and over time, a market pricing forms where there's some equilibrium about roughly the crowd agrees that this should be the right answer. Well, if the crowd agrees that this should be the right answer, then it's hard to be consistently right against that crowd, right? It's hard to be like, I'm smarter than everybody. It's just hard. It's just not, for the most part, it's just not a thing for most people. By
Right.
definition, it can only be a thing for a very small handful of people at any given time. There's no such thing as 1,000 people are all smarter than the crowd. 1,000 people are the crowd, right?
Right.
So, there's two people that are smarter than the crowd. Are you one of those two people? Maybe you are. You probably aren't. So yeah. So in that respect, it becomes, and you have to understand at each point in the process how big is the crowd, how much market is there, how much all that stuff. It's all nuanced. But Sunday morning, right before an NFL game, if the pregame spread is 7, 99.9% of people listening, you're not beating that. You just can't, because it's not you.
Right.
So whereas all the other bets, how do they get made? They get made by a company like the one that we started, Deck Prism. And so what I'm talking about is all the alternate spreads. Okay, the market spread is -7, but you want to bet plus 17.5. Well,
Right.
what odds do I offer you for plus 17.5 when the market spread is? There's no market for plus 17.5. I have to do math to come up with what I think the right answer is. And that math basically says, okay, well, if the market thinks -7 is the right number, what is the right odds for plus 17.5? And that's just, that's me and my model. And that's it. So instead of, there's no longer a wisdom of the crowds there. It's how good is the math Ed did, or
Mm-hmm.
not, right? And now I want to create, thousands of markets. Again, you go to a modern sports book, you see 1,000 of these things. They got alternate spreads on every number. They got alternate totals on every number. They got alternate spreads and totals on every quarter and every half. They got player props. They got player props with alternate numbers. I mean, there ain't no market for any of that. There's now single game parlays. There's, team props. There's thousands of bets. And the way all those prices get made is somebody like me, a nerd, writes a computer program that basically takes the few pieces of market information that do exist and extrapolates that to 1,000 different options. And any one of those things, I could have done the math wrong for any number of reasons. Maybe I'm just bad at math. Maybe I'm good at math, but this game is an exception for some reason in this way. Some of this is very hard player usage. How do I know how many minutes, Giannis is going to get tonight? Well, I got to guess. Ultimately, some human beings got to basically stick a finger in the air and say, I think 28 minutes is the right answer.
Right.
That could be wrong. So yeah, it's like way, 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 way easier to find odds and lines that are wrong, or in other words, good bets, into that menu of thousands of things. Now, the problem is which is easier to beat. Well, anybody who offers those bets also knows it's much, much easier to find things that are wrong there, and therefore they don't let you get down if you're consistently beating them. So that's if you are able to bet into major markets and win, in one way that's the easiest to beat because you can actually bet consistently on those and win and more or less keep doing it. Whereas, if you wanna beat the modern sportsbook stuff, yeah, it's much easier to find good bets, but getting down and having any kind of longevity is becomes the problem.
Absolutely. And you also talk in the book about how to actually beat a sports book. And you talk about, well, you do what quants like you and I do. Like you build a comprehensive model that incorporate all the significant aspects of the game that you're trying to bet. And that's the best way to beat the market. So how do you reconcile that with the fact that you're beating these same types of math models when you're talking about these alternate spreads, alternate totals, same game parlays?
I mean, my model's better than your model. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
answer.
no. Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's what it means to beat those things. Is it means to say, and even if you don't have a model, it could be a mental model. Like even if you've never written a line of code in your life, you can. It is possible to have essentially a mental, almost intuitive model on some of this stuff, and be like, well, if this number, and for that you need some sports knowledge and some basic working math facility in your brain, but you could say, well, these two answers can't possibly be right at the same time, right? That's the easiest way to find this stuff is you find two prices that are just logically incompatible for some reason, and they could be logically incompatible for all kinds of reasons. But yeah, and you just say, well, these can't both be right. So the easiest way to deal with that is you just bet them both, and you just figure and you just take the difference, right? That's an arbitrage. Or you could take it a step further and you can try to figure out which of the two or both is wrong and why. And if you do that, then you'll be more profitable because you'll be able to pick off only you'll be able to avoid betting into bad bets and kind of more selectively bet into the good ones. But yeah, that's the idea is you basically do a better job. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be comprehensive. Like I said, kind of at the beginning, it's one thing to build a model that, finds some good bets. It's another thing to price all this stuff. It's an entirely different problem because the sort of operator problem is, no, I don't need to find some good in-play bets. I need to make lines on every in-play bet on the entire menu at all times up to the second. And I got to be right all the time. I mean, it's an order of magnitude harder problem to solve with much more complicated technology. You need more human power to build the models, to operate the models. The human power is flawed. People make mistakes. There's bugs in software, all that stuff. So yeah, that's the way to do it is you build a model that basically does math on the wagers offered and you figure out which ones can't be right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like there's like a two-pronged answer, right? So the idea is like you as a bettor make a better model than what the sports books have, and that's absolutely possible. And then the other aspect is that you don't have to have a model that's right on every single situation like the sportsbook models have to be, right? And between the two of
Your
those,
model can
you
be
can win.
very simple. Your model can just be looking for one thing, one effect,
Yep.
one whatever, and then you're like, I'm just going to find good bets using that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ignore the rest of the menu. I'm not going to try to find good bets elsewhere. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good approach. Ed, you in the book talk about same game parlays. These are often thought of as sucker bets because you're parlaying a bunch of bets together in a game, and then the sportsbook add a huge amount of hold, and that's why it's a sucker bet. That's why they show up every time you flip open your sportsbook app, because they want you to bet into these. Why is that not the case?
Right. So the way the same game parlay works. So first of all, I think people have a misunderstanding of parlays. Right? They think parlays equal sucker bet. Just let's forget about the same game
Yes,
parlay part,
true,
just the
very true.
traditional. And that's just not right. I mean, all a parlay is it's turning over the winnings from one bet into another bet. So if you pick 3 bad bets and you turn over the winnings of one bad bet that you happen to win into another bad bet, well, yeah, that's a sucker play. If you pick 3 good bets and you turn the winnings of one bet over into the next bet, guess what? You just win even more. So that's the first misunderstanding people have about parlays, is they kind of misunderstand that fact that they see suckers bet parlays and they assume parlays are sucker bets. That's just not true. Um, Now, same game parlay works a little differently, because same game parlay, there's some black box magic going on. So the way a same game parlay works is you pick options, again, from the same game, where the options are correlated, where I'm going to pick Mahomes passing yards and Mahomes passing touchdowns and Chiefs points. Well, obviously those three things all go together. If the Chiefs score a lot of points, then Mahomes probably got a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. If the Chiefs didn't get a lot of points, then Mahomes maybe got fewer yards and fewer touchdowns, right? So all that stuff goes together. If I want to bet on all 3 of those things together, then when the sports books today, modern sports books, want you to be able to do that because it's fun. That's why they offer it. Just to be clear, they're not offering it to fleece people. They're offering it because it's fun and people like to do it. Right. And they're saying, this is fun and people like to do it. How can we create a product that lets people do it? Because sometimes I see on Twitter, oh, they're ramming this down our throats and they want to scam us. No, they're giving the people what they want. What they want is this, and then they're trying to do it in a way that makes it work for them. So, yeah. So, I mean, I would say that yes, they want people to bet. Yes, they make money on the stuff, and they do want people to bet the parlays. But it's not. I don't think it's. I think sometimes people are a little too cynical about it. But yeah, the sportsbook's problem is they have to figure out how often your 3 bets win together, and they have to figure out how often any arbitrary set of selections that any player could possibly make win together. It's not easy. So the sort of, I would say, the most common industry-wide way of solving this problem is to write a game simulator. So that's kind of what's on the back end of most of your same game parlay pricing engines, is that there's a simulation that'll simulate the game, I don't know, X number of times. And then when you click in your parlay legs, it basically just counts how many simulations, your bet would have won in, and divides by the total and says that's your chance of winning. That's more or less how it works. And it's hard to build an accurate simulator of anything. I mean, sports are complicated processes, and the more options you want to add for the player, the harder it is to get it all right. I mean, think about the moment you add player props, the problem becomes much harder from the operator side, because think about how players are used. Like, just in the NFL, I mean, your simulator has to know the difference between a possession receiver that's going to get 10 catches for 80 yards, and your guy that runs go routes all day long and gets 1 catch for 57 yards and a touchdown. Your simulator has to know the difference between those 2 guys. And otherwise you'll be able to parlay, right? I mean, you could pick that. If it doesn't know the difference between that, obviously you could pick apart how it's going to simulate how many touchdowns each of those guys gets based on receptions and usage and yards and total team points and everything, right? You could just bet that every which way if they don't get that right and destroy it, right? So they have to get all those details right. They have to get, in hockey, they have to know who plays with who. Because if you want to parlay someone's goals with someone's assists, I mean, they need to know who's on what line, right? And same with basketball. They need to know which players tend to play together and if I get this many points, who's going to get the assists. And, the simulator has to know all that. It has to be right. It has to be up to date. Maybe the coach made a change. Maybe a player got traded. Maybe there's a rotation. Maybe, the stuff, if you follow sports, you know how much this stuff changes day to day. And yeah, you got to, if you want to be offering these bets, you have to get it all right all the time. It's hard. So that's the answer for why it's beatable it's not just hard, it's an impossible problem from the operator side to get it all right all the time. And so all you got to do is pick the little widgets apart and figure out, okay, well, they're saying this guy's going to get goals and this guy's going to get assists. Is it right? And just pick it. And you could just sit there all day long with the widget, put legs in, and look and see what it does, and you could just say, well, that's not right. Hey, it seems to think if these two guys play together, they're positively correlated, but they're on different lines now. So now they're negatively correlated. Let me bet this 17 different ways. It's just, you could just sit there all day and pick it apart. And so that's why it's definitely not a site. Now, if you play it naively and you just kind of bet LeBron James over and, whatever. You bet like a recreational player, yeah, it'll eat you alive because there's a huge amount. What they do is they say, okay, well, how often does this parlay win? And then they tack on an enormous amount of hold, right? So they say, okay, your parlay is going to win 10% of the time. We're going to pay you like it wins 20% of the time. Well, obviously, if you just bet that naively, you're going to get crushed. But if you systematically try to pick the pricing apart, it's really not hard, and you could do it all day long and pick the product apart. Yeah, you got to be willing to sit there and play with the widgets and look for the stuff, and then once you find it, okay, now you got an angle.
For sure.
Maybe it's a persistent angle. Maybe it's always wrong in the same way every night, right? Now you got to figure out how to bet it, and you got to bet it in a way that, eventually they're going to close your account if you beat them too bad on it. They'll figure it out. So you gotta be careful about how you bet it, and you gotta, it's just that's the hard part. As from the betting side, is it's time consuming and a pain in the butt to do it at scale. That's the problem. It's an impossible product to nail every night. It's just it's literally impossible. So they have every incentive to put the product out, and it will never be perfect. So there you go. Have at it, folks.
Ed Miller, thank you so much for joining me. And really, I appreciate you and Matthew writing this book. I read The Logic of Sports Betting, and that was awesome as well. I think Interception is also awesome. And I kind of knew it as soon as you guys first started, the second chapter is about what goes on behind the sports books. And I was like, oh, well, these guys know exactly what is going on there. So this is going to be a fantastic read.
The Audible version just came out. So there's a paperback, a Kindle, and now an audiobook. And yep, just on Amazon. You can Google the name of the book, or you can Google Ed Miller or whatever. I'm also on Twitter at Ed Miller Poker. You can tweet at me. I try to respond to tweets. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. And you can also get a copy of Interception if you become a member of the Power Rank. As of right now, I have 20 copies of the book, and I'm mailing them to the next 20 people that become a member. Members right now, as we head into March, will get all my bracket advice and some college basketball predictions, and then player props during the tournament. So if that interests you, you can check that out at thepowerrank.net.